All right, well, you're very, very welcome to this GEM COVID-19 Crisis Online Learning Session. We're going to give some perspectives today from Thailand and Japan, and I'm delighted to welcome Ulrike Guelich, who is the head of our GEM team in Thailand. She works with Bangkok University, and I'm also delighted to have Noriyuki Takahashi on the panel, who hails from GEM Japan, Musashi University, and both of our GEM experts will give some interesting observations and perspectives on how entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship in Thailand and in Japan have been affected by the current, all too familiar, unfortunately, COVID-19 crisis. Just before we kick off, I'd like to just give you a quick rundown, very quick rundown on what GEM is. GEM is a consortium of national country teams. Uli and Nori are representatives of 2 of those teams, but we have about 50 to 60 teams that participate in our research every year. We associate with top academic institutions. Our financing partners are mostly governments, and we carry out survey-based research on entrepreneurship worldwide. In fact, GEM is the only global research source that collecting data on entrepreneurship directly from individual entrepreneurs. We do that by carrying out an adult population survey, which provides analysis on the characteristics, motivations, and ambitions of individuals that are starting businesses, as well as observing social attitudes towards entrepreneurship. We also run another very interesting survey, which is the National Expert Survey. It looks at the national context in which individuals actually start businesses. So this makes GEM's tools and data pretty unique. They benefit numerous stakeholder groups. GEM actually began in 1999 as a joint project between Babson College in the United States and London Business School. At this stage, therefore, we have about 21 years of data, which makes it very, very interesting from a longitudinal research perspective. We've surveyed over those 21 years some 3 million adults in 114 economies across the globe. We actually carry out about 150,000 interviews, even more than that in any one year, and 50 economies participated last year in 2019. We work with hundreds of specialists in entrepreneurship research and multiple academic and research institutions, as well as funding institutions. So that gives you a grounding on what GEM actually is and its value, moreover, in terms of its research and the hard data that it generates, hard and credible data. So what I would like to do now with Uli and Nori is to get a little bit of a quick overview on past crises and sometimes their effects on entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship. We'd like to sort of set the context in terms of the learning from such past events and how they might apply in today's world. So Nori, let's kick off with you. The world really does seem to move from crisis to crisis, and Japan has had a fair share of crises in the very recent past even. But with this in mind, can you give an overview to us on impact and reactions of entrepreneurs in Japan as a result of, for example, the financial crisis of 2007-2008?
Okay. Yes. Yeah, of course, global financial crisis of 2007 to 8 damaged the Japanese economy. Looking at the rate of TA, so TA went down by 2% in Japan. So looking at this chart, the red line is Japan. Yes. And also looking at the unemployment rate also went up by 2%. So looking at those, yes, this chart represents the trend of Japanese unemployment rate.
Right.
Looking at those, the index, so of course, Japan was damaged by this financial crisis. And in addition to this comment, so I like to say Japan has damaged by this crisis, and of course, most all world countries were damaged.
Yes.
Then, so most advanced countries, probably the young people's entrepreneurial attitude has changed toward more entrepreneurial. But in case of Japan, after this great financial crisis, unfortunately, as for the entrepreneurial attitude, they are not changed.
Okay, so actually, could we go to just the previous slide, Chris, please? Thank you very much. And can you just be specific exactly about what we mean by total early stage entrepreneurship? That is for the non-GEM listeners out there. What do we mean by total early stage entrepreneurship? How do we define that?
It's my question?
Yes,
yes.
please. Yeah.
The definition of TA?
Okay. Yes, yes, our definition, just so that people are clear on what the graphs represent. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. TA represent the number of people who are in entrepreneurial process per 100 adult people.
Okay. All right. So this is something that we measure on an ongoing basis in every country. And as you can see, the impacts are quite visible when you look on a longitudinal perspective. Nori, have you finished commenting those two slides?
Yes. Yes, yes. I finished. Okay.
Okay, Uli, I know you joined GEM at a later stage, so you weren't actually part of there wasn't a GEM Thailand team at the time of the 2008 financial crisis. But in your opinion, as an expert in entrepreneurship, you may have some thoughts about crisis impact on entrepreneurship. Again, Thailand can be quite prone to catastrophe, as we know. And so have you got some views on that?
Actually, we can say that the crisis 2007-8 had impact, but the economy bounced back very fast. And also the tsunami in 2004, the tourist numbers were higher half a year after tsunami than before the tsunami. So everything came back very fast. But what we saw, and the very big crisis we had was the Tom Yam Goong crisis in '97, which originated from Thailand, actually. That's why it has a Thai name. And before Tom Yam Goong, the decade before, Thai economy grew by 9% per year. And Tom Yam Goong actually knocked the economy off the rails. And so the Thai economic boom came to an abrupt end. And we still see the remnants of this crisis today in terms of unfinished high-rise office buildings in the center of Bangkok. The most famous one is the Ghost Tower, because it's unfinished until now. We saw some of those in 2008 as well, but they're gone. And unemployment rose at that time to nearly 9%, which is high for Thai economy. And factories closed, enterprises closed, but because they were unable to borrow money. So the reasons were different. And it cut across all social classes. But some of that, and we have the Thai Bankers Association, they say that the COVID crisis can be compared to the Tom Yam Goong crisis in terms of, for example, the unemployment rate in Greater Bangkok in May already was nearly 10%. And the majority of them lost the job because of COVID-19 and the lockdown measures, combination of both. And also the CEOs a survey among CEOs said that the impact is even more severe than the 1997 Asian financial crisis, because they say it disrupted not only business, but also society and also the daily life, and all of that on a global basis. So it's a lot more impact. And I mean, all the countries had to revise probably their GDP growth, but the perception is that Thailand is going down 7.7%, which is high, and we are highly dependent also on tourism. And we know that, and we'll talk about tourism later in this webinar anyhow, but tourism will just not happen. And so the recovery rate will be very long, and it may be worse than what was seen during the Tom Yam Goong crisis. But there's one important difference between the two crises. This time, the Thai government really launched rapid and large-scale measures to prevent further aggravation of the situation. That's the big difference.
Okay. Yeah, and what do we know in terms of learning from the past, what we know about the contribution of entrepreneurship to rebooting economies? I mean, just very quickly, would you say that this has a major role? What's been your experience, Nori?
Yeah. As for the entrepreneurs, the contribution to Japanese economy, unfortunately, so far, we didn't have so-called super ventures, such as their sales is over $1 billion US.
Right.
But looking at the local economy, so I have some good news. We have a lot of local venture, which sales is probably around $1 million US to 10 million US. It's not so big, but they are utilizing the special agricultural products such as apple or small citrus named yuzu in Japanese. And also Japan has a lot of historical remains in local areas. So local economy realizes the importance of the local products and the local historical remains, and they started to utilize them, and so they established new companies, and the new companies earned now so around $1 million US to $10 million. It's not so big, but this is a good sign for Japan. Probably local economy is more severe relative to metropolitan areas such as Tokyo and Osaka.
Okay, thank you for that. Yes, thank you for that perspective. Uli, would you be able to just give us a perspective in Thailand? I know since you joined GEM, for example, what has been happening for entrepreneurs? Can you give us a little bit of a snapshot?
Yeah, I can. And you see from the slide that is on screen at the moment, that Thailand has a high rate of total early stage entrepreneurs, which are the startups and the young businesses up to 3.5 months only. We have the same amount of established businesses. So around 40% of the Thai adult population is engaged in entrepreneurial activity of some kind, as very often as micro business, very often as informal business as well. And we see, I'm involved since 2013, but was involved in the reports from 2011. So we see that there is a dip on the slide after 2013. Yes. And 2013, we had protests in Thailand, and we had a Bangkok lockdown, and many businesses closed. And we saw, we had the military taking over in 2014, right before we started our survey in 2014. And we see the dip to 2015. First, initially, there was, people were quite happy that they could reopen and there was an end to all the demonstrations. But then the reality kicked in, and it was a difficult time, but already in 2016, we were kind of back to the, if you draw the line, we are always around 18%. So, so we see some impact, but apparently, I mean, the Thai culture, people bouncing back and they're taking the burden. And so it's also, I think, part of the culture. This time we are hit really hard with a lot harder. So we will see what the results will be after we do the survey. But we see this impact. And we have also in 2015, we had the ASEAN Economic Community, end of 2015. So the open free trade in the ASEAN, the 10 ASEAN countries. So we saw increase in internationalization of businesses. So they were starting to go across the borders, which they did not before. And the young entrepreneurs became more innovative over the time. I joined GEM as well. And in the last 2 years, we saw a shift that we lost a lot of the established business. We had 33% in 2014, and we're down to 21. And we lost a lot of them. There was a lot of street vendors gave up because regulations changed, and the government also wanted to organize informal businesses more, so they closed down. But then the startup rates started with other types of businesses. So we saw a shift from street vendors, for example, to motorcycle taxi drivers.
Okay, it just sounds as if in Thailand, entrepreneurs are extremely flexible and quite agile at identifying opportunity. On the other hand, Nori, so the rates of the tea rates in Japan are obviously, well, according to this graph, significantly lower. So can you give us a little bit of a taste of what the situation was for entrepreneurs prior to this COVID crisis?
Yes. So yes, as you pointed out, so the level of TA rate in Japan is very lower than other countries.
Yeah.
But looking at carefully at the trend of TA rate in Japan, so in 2000, so compared with 2000 and after 2010, so the trend is a little bit changed.
Right.
Yeah, after so 2012, well, 2013, so Japan, the trend is a little bit upward. You can realize, can you see the change of the TA trend after 2013? No.
So on the total early stage entrepreneurship slide that's up at the moment, after 2013, there's a kind of rebound upwards. Yes.
Yes.
Right.
So yes, of course, the level of TA is still low, but
it's going up. That's the fact, is that it was actually going up. So you know what I'm going to let's kind of move on to the current crisis. You've mentioned some aspects that make it different, Uli, you already, but how would you kind of put that in a nutshell, Uli? What are the characteristics of this crisis that make it different to any other?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So compared with tsunami disaster, that hit in 2000, yes, this right.
Yeah.
Tsunami disaster is so big, but looking at this slide, so tsunami hit the only part of Japan.
Right.
So we call it Tohoku area.
Yes.
So tsunami disaster is, I think, area-specific crisis, but it takes very long time to recover. It's still recovering, and also looking at the area hit by tsunami, these areas represent less than 5% of Japan in terms of GDP. So it's a very so big disaster, but in terms of economy, so this area have only 5% of the total. But looking at COVID-19 this time, so I say this disaster is an industry-specific crisis. I mean, of course, restaurant and hotel damaged very much, but on the other hand, IT industry is in good condition.
Yes.
So I mean, industry-specific crisis. But compared with tsunami disaster, this disaster is nationwide.
Right.
Yes.
Uli, would you? Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and I agree. I don't know, but I think, so recovery will be very quickly. It takes relatively short time to recover relative to tsunami disaster.
Well, that's a really interesting perspective, and a little bit, I think, counterintuitive in that a lot of experts out there thinks it'll take a relatively long time to recover. So that will be very interesting to observe as we move forward. Nori, thank you. Uli, would you have anything to add to that in terms of how you're seeing the contrasts?
I think that it will take longer to recover. And I also see that, I mean, Japan also is export-oriented, and we have a high export-oriented base of industries here. And but we see that since the people are out of jobs, they're saving their money. They're just not spending because they need it for essential things only. Some of them struggling to buy food in Thailand. And so I think that there will be an impact on other industries in terms of reduced revenues, because just not so many people will go out and buy things, especially non-essential goods. I think we'll see a dip, and this will take longer. And I would say, and this is what experts here say, that it will be end of 2021. So it will take this year and next year.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. But again, I think that's just going to be interesting, and it's sort of the value of GEM is to be able to see these differences between countries as they come into focus over time. Uli, you've actually done research in youth entrepreneurship. You produced a report that was circulated to the participants in advance of this webinar. So maybe can you talk about the changes that this crisis is likely to have on the expectations and realities of young entrepreneurs in particular? Thank you.
First of all, I would like to point out that how many youth we have, especially in Asia Pacific. So we have 1.1 billion in the world, and 750 million of them are in Asia Pacific, which is from Pakistan to Australia. And this includes some of the wealthiest as well as some of the least developed economies in the world. And so despite a general increasing wealth, there are big disparities, and youth are a significant group here. And this region actually hosts at the moment the largest generation of youth, I would say, in history, and they carry the burden. Wow. And I think they will see an impact. They carry the burden to sustain what was built up, the growth, the socio-economic growth, and also maybe to improve it. And this will be very difficult because they're the future people to grow the region. And in the last 20 years, the youth population grew by nearly 140 million people, but the youth labor force decreased. So there is this big gap of youth that are also neither in employment, nor in education, nor in any training. And this is how we already went into this crisis. So this is the as is. So, and the 62% of all the NEET, then either in employment, education, or training young people are also in Asia Pacific. So we talk about 220 million youth who went into that crisis just being somewhere. And also in Thailand, the share of youth NEET is large. It's nearly 15% of the youth population are neither in education or training. And that's why entrepreneurship is a focus of UNDP, especially where we did the report together. And so TEA rates actually in GEM show that they're higher for youth than for older people. So the
Right.
startup rates and young businesses rates are higher than for olders, but they often lack the skills, they often lack finance, they often have a problem. But we see now, there was a quick survey in the next slide, we see that the troubling picture of these already vulnerable youth enterprises said 86% said that the coronavirus had negatively impacted their business. Right. And of these 86%, 1 in 3 said it's a major slowdown, and 1 in 4, 25% have stopped their business already. So right. We see that it is difficult time, and of these 86%, 88, as we see in the slide, have reduced customer demand. I think any business can report the same probably, and supply chain disruptions and delays in government business. So the governments are, they do different things now. So delays in progressing government business, distribution channel disruptions. And for example, an agri-tech startup said our entire R&D process has stumbled because the lab facilities were completely shut down. So they just there were different things that impacted them, or the cooks were quarantined, bookings canceled, investments postponed, a co-owner stranded somewhere and couldn't come back because of the lockdowns. And because we had regional lockdowns in Thailand as well. And as a result of this outlook, 35% had to lay off staff or reduce staff hours, and 25% had to cancel the orders they had placed by their suppliers, again, leading to impact there. 25% had to postpone investments, and 24% had to reduce their wages in order to be able still to be here. Yeah. And in the next slide, we see that finance is a big issue. 86% of these young entrepreneurs reported a decrease in financial turnover, and 43% had to reach into borrowings or into savings. And I mean, they're young people, they cannot have a lot of savings, actually. If they have to reach into their savings and they already finance their business out of their savings mostly, it has a big of impact. There are tax breaks, loans, grants. The government does a lot, but it apparently does not really reach the young entrepreneurs. But there's also good news, I have to say, because 30% of these young entrepreneurs connected with other young entrepreneurs and discussed business strategies, how to face or to survive this crisis. Yes. And so I think that this is good that young people apparently talk to each other and say, what can we do? And they also came up with a lot of innovative ideas.
And that actually points to the importance of networks for entrepreneurs and innovators. So they learn from each other and can maybe leapfrog some of the real difficulties and challenges. Nori, have you, I mean, I know you interact a great deal with students who are entrepreneurs as well. Perhaps you'd like to comment on what's been your learning from your students?
Yes. Potentially, looking at the unemployment rate, so Japan, in case of Japan, it doesn't change, almost changed. But when I talk with my student, their mind has a little bit changed, because my student face a so big crisis, and so the way of their living has
Has changed.
Also has changed.
Yeah.
Yes. And so in Japan, so most students tend to look for their jobs at the large companies.
Right.
Yes. Yeah. But it's so. But under these circumstances, my student has changed their mind just to look for a small or medium enterprises.
Right.
Or they have some plans to become entrepreneurs. So they say, how can I become entrepreneurs? So there are common questions, yes.
So in fact, it's not out of the question that there will be an increase in tea rates in Japan as a result of this crisis, perhaps.
I hope so. Yeah, I hope.
We'll be able to observe that with the GEM research for sure. Now, you've both talked about sectors being impacted. Could you just maybe, in a nutshell, Uli, summarize kind of the sectors that, well, you've mentioned tourism. I mean, does that put it in a nutshell? That's the biggest impact, right?
Yeah, I mean, Thailand tourism sector contributes 20% to the GDP, and we have regions such as Phuket, for example, where it contributes 85% to Phuket's GDP. So, and 85%, we saw the tourist numbers go down from 40 million last year to now 0. Right. The prognosis is, and there are a lot of businesses, it's not only the hotels, it's a lot of travel related businesses that are impacted here as well. And so we have around 80 million foreign international tourists and 80 million Thai tourists visiting within Thailand. But these 80 million foreign or international tourists have a lot higher spending for their travels. So this is 30,000 baht per day, which is roughly $1,000 US. They're spending and for their travels, whereas the local Thai tourists spend around a quarter of that, maybe 250 US dollars. So even if we do not have the international, even if we only have the Thai, it will be, and we're not sure if the travel will really take place, but there is a big, the government is trying to really support domestic travel very much. Right. There is a support scheme now, just now there. And so the hotel and tourism related industries are, I think, others as well. We see positive signs like the fisheries, the fish stock really increased because there was no fishing and it had time to recover. I mean, for tourism, there are also good opportunities, but probably with a new view on tourism, because we have the turtles coming back to Koh Samui, where they haven't been for decades. And so we see a recovery of wildlife and of, which gives a high it's highly attractive for tourists. Yes. So their discussion, and we just had 2 days ago in Phuket, there was a meeting, a mediating meeting between the local Phuket government and banks, 15 banks who are in place and tourism related businesses, in order to mediate that the banks really support the businesses in terms of whatever they can, loans, interest rate cuts. And so organized by the government, I think it's a good move to find solutions, and we will probably see shifts in this area.
Ways and means of doing things. Yeah. I mean, what you point to is perhaps there's an opportunity to talk more about a sustainable kind of tourism into the future, which makes sure that resources are protected, so that everything is more appealing and sustainable into the future. Nori, can we turn to opportunities from the crisis? So what are you hearing from your student entrepreneurs, which are moving, as you say, more to thinking about working with SMEs. What kind of opportunities are they seeing in Japan?
Yes, in Japan, so also restaurant industry and the hotel industry and the tourism industry damaged severely. But some industry is in good conditions, such as IT-related industry and such as food delivery and healthcare industry. Yeah. I think young people are seeking for the business opportunity in the food delivery and healthcare industry and the IT related industry, because in Japan, so unfortunately, compared with other advanced countries, so the IT literacy, the level of IT literacy is pretty low, unfortunately, including me.
Okay.
But so thanks to due to the COVID-19, the people are forced to use the personal computer and smartphone, and so many apps. And so I think during the recent 2 months, the adult people's IT literacy
has increased
up so drastically.
Yeah.
So I think this is a source of business opportunities for young people.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of, relieved to learn that, I'm sitting in Switzerland. And so this is something I've observed here as well, this kind of leapfrogging into better IT skills. With Japan, we tend to assume that Japanese are extremely proficient in IT, so it can be counterintuitive. It's the same generation gap, perhaps, that exists in other countries. All right, I need to move on. I'd like to encourage the participants at this stage to enter any questions in the Q&A section, the Q&A room on the Zoom app. And I'd like to move with our panelists on commenting the responses, the governmental responses from Thailand and Japan. Uli, what's the Thai government currently doing? I mean, you showed the graph earlier, and something like 8% of young entrepreneurs were not receiving any assistance, I think. But do you have some other points that you could add in terms of the current situation, the support from government to SMEs, and how well it's perceived by the entrepreneurs?
The government has a relief package of 1.9 trillion Thai baht, which is more than $60 billion, and which is roughly 12% of the GDP. I know Japan has a relief package of 20% of the GDP. So, but it includes $16 billion soft loans for small and medium enterprises, and reduced interest rates and credit lines. Also, there is loan restructuring, there are tax measures, direct and indirect, and employment-related measures. There's also a special package for the tourism operators, which is $32 million, and debt suspensions, and also the tourism-related companies needed to deposit security money, 50 to 200,000 Thai baht for their license, and now they can get back up to 70% of that from the government just to stay afloat. So they get some money back. So there are things. There's one thing that kind of bothers at least some people, which is the startup funding. Because this is very often done also through venture capital or non-government resources, and we see that depending on who we talk to, between 30 to 50% of all startups are expected to disappear during COVID. And so 500 tuk-tuks, the local operating unit of 500 startups here, they facilitate bridge funding for companies they support financially. And they are now prioritizing education, food, logistics, and health sector. And they say the tech sectors will do well, but not the deep tech sectors. So those who are deep in tech require too much money, and investors will be reluctant to give money at the moment. They will just wait. Right. How is it going to develop? And apparently startups, those who received funding, have 6 months until they run out of money. So there is not much time left to grab that. And I'm not, those are younger people normally, they belong to the younger entrepreneurs. So this is difficult. And travel tech startups, which we have in Thailand also, they're heavily hit, and it could take a long time, if at all, to bounce back.
Okay, thank you. Nori, I'm sure that the Japanese perspective is somewhat different. Go ahead.
Yes, yes. Looking at this slide, so Japanese government prepared the 108 trillion yen. So it's about 1 trillion US dollars. Yeah, and as emergency economic measures. So they took a lot of measures, but so I pick up 4 measures on slide. And the first of all, so is a special cash payment to each nationals.
Right.
Each nationals, including a baby.
Oh, yeah, my goodness. I actually didn't know that. Yeah, that's...
including babies, yes.
Yes.
By
amazing.
100,000 yen, it's 1,000 US dollars.
Yes, okay.
Yes, it's a big money. Also, the measures for small businesses, government paid 500,000 to 1 million yen per company a month.
Right.
So it's also big money.
Yes.
Yes.
Structured approach. Yes.
Yes. And government also paid leave compensation to SMEs employees by around 100,000 yen or 1,000 US dollars a month.
Okay.
Yes. So probably COVID-19 hit the restaurant and hotels and tourists. Maybe most of them is industry related to consumption. So the government tried to compensate those industries by paying those monies. And also, as for the loans, government conducted emergency loans to SMEs. It is up to 60 million yen. 60 million yen means so 600,000 US dollars.
Right.
It's a pretty big money for small businesses.
I mean, you know, these figures are just beyond imagining, aren't they? Yeah, you know, what I want to do is leave a little bit of time at the end for a few questions. We have a handful, but I think it's very important that we move to the next point, which is one of the things that GEM does is we ask our national experts to rate countries in terms of a certain number of conditions. We call these the entrepreneurial framework conditions.
Yes.
And so I really would like to ask you, Nori, to start by commenting these. And so entrepreneurial framework conditions is, we basically mean how nurturing is the framework, the context, the business context for entrepreneurs in a given country. So over to you, Nori, to talk about the Japan case.
Yes. Looking at this chart, so you may realize that Japan has three weak points. The first one is entrepreneurial education, especially at school stage. And the second point is cultural and social norms. According to the GEM data, so 70% of adult people does 70% of adult people don't think that becoming entrepreneur is good choice.
Yeah.
So
they're not attracted
probably,
by that choice.
Yeah,
Okay,
yes.
yes. Mm-hmm.
And the third thing is that we lack of professional human resources to support entrepreneurs, such as lawyer and accountants.
Yeah, but from what you said earlier, that's perhaps going to start changing somewhat as a result of this COVID crisis. Yeah, the perception of entrepreneurship, right? Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, if COVID-19 stimulate the young people's mind towards entrepreneurship, I think we may overcome 2 or 3 of these weak points. I
interesting.
Expect. Yeah.
So there will almost be a domino effect, perhaps. You know, as soon as young people are seeing this as valuable, entrepreneurial education will start shifting, perhaps. And Uli, could you perhaps comment on the framework conditions for Thailand, which are quite different again, but that's what makes it interesting, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, I was quite astonished that Thailand fares better in entrepreneurial finance than Japan. In comparison to average GEM, we're below average in also government entrepreneurship programs. But I see two main points where COVID especially will deliver changes. This is the educational part as well. All educational part, entrepreneurship education at school stage and later, and government entrepreneurship programs. And this is the online teaching. Thailand is well connected in terms of internet everywhere, and also a lot of mobile phones. But if we go to rural areas, there is the problem with online education that not every family has a laptop or PC or more than one, because if they have more than one kid and online teaching should take place online and it's at the same time, it is difficult. And so there were discussions to move schools online through TV or through PC online using Zoom or whatever, but it is apparently not possible. And Thailand is one of the 55% of all countries only have Thailand. In Thailand, you have a legal right for education. So you can go to court if it doesn't take place. And it's only 55% of all countries that have that. And so this is a topic. And so right now, Thailand decided to switch back in some areas where it is not possible to go online just because of constraints for the families. And also constraints, you're not able to deliver tablets to every kid in Thailand. It's just not possible. And so there are measures now in place how to do face-to-face in a limited form, like doubling, the classes or splitting the classes. And so I see entrepreneurship education there as well as a big topic that has to come in. And I see another post-COVID change probably in the market dynamics, or maybe in the market burdens and entry, not in the regulations, but the burdens, because I think that we will get quite a hit on international, 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 international I think, dynamics in the markets. We might be able to compensate that. The government is talking about travel bubbles to let international travel happen with certain countries where, I mean, Thailand, we have 24 days with 0 locally infected COVID cases. We have 0 for 24 days in a row. We only have imported cases. So, so the question is, can we make a bubble with Vietnam? They're also fine as we are at the moment. And so usually any international traveler needs 14 days of quarantine. That restricts any, travel as a tourist. You don't want to go in quarantine if you come to a place for holidays. So these travel bubbles might maybe at least give some kind of support to the tourism sector, and maybe also start with market dynamics to get forward, at least with that sector. I think the other manufacturing sites where we have a big portion of electronics and automotive sector, I mean, they are all hit by just drop in demand. So this will take some time, but I think that there we will see changes in these two, education and market.
Okay, really interesting. I mean, and also it's so interesting to see the differences between Japan and Thailand there. Now, I'm very interested in hearing your perspectives on the kinds of things that you're interested in learning from the GEM research this year. As you know, we have modified our research interests, our research instruments to make sure that they're COVID-19 specific. But before I move to that question, I'd like to just take one question from the participants. How has, because it's quite relevant here, how has cross-border entrepreneurship been affected in Thailand and Japan, especially in light of COVID-19? So cross-border entrepreneurship. Do you, either of you have a view on that? Uli, do you want to go first?
I'm not fully informed, but I think that Thailand only let essential goods were allowed into Thailand. So just to send something across the border was difficult, because for some time especially the postal services, they didn't accept even a letter going outside country, and they just opened that again. So I think that some businesses might struggle, even though we had international freights going back and forth, but it was restricted at some point. And so I think we have a lot of small businesses who are situated right at the border, and they do most of their revenues from across the border, and they are highly affected because there is no cross-border. The border in Thailand is closed. So you cannot come into Thailand. You can come on certain conditions, sure, but you cannot just go across the border and sell in Cambodia what you did before or deliver. And so those businesses, and they were kind of striving in the last years, and they're highly affected.
Okay, Nori, do you have a view on cross-border entrepreneurship?
Yeah, in Japan, so I think in machinery industries, there are a lot of small businesses or entrepreneurs who make a very excellent parts.
Okay.
Yeah, and so in manufacturing industry, so the pretty small business even goes across the border to set up their plant or the branch and increase their sales. But as for the service industries, we are very they are not in good conditions to go.
So it's an industry specific problem. Yeah, really. Yeah. Some sectors doing well, as you said earlier, some sectors not doing so well at all. Yeah, just to say, well, thank you, Dr. Raja Kasim, who shared some of her research with us. We'll have a look at that. Thank you. Okay, I have another question here. Is there any information and evidence about new venture creation trends during COVID-19 in either of the two countries? Either of you have a view on that, or is it too early to have trend data on that?
I didn't see any new ventures at the moment. I see that there are new business opportunities coming up, and some people are talking about them, but I don't think they're taking the step to start that at the moment. So I think it is too early at the moment, because we just here in Thailand, we just opened, for example, southern Thailand, Phuket just opened the airport again a week ago.
Right.
And so you couldn't even go to Bangkok. From certain airports. So if you do a business under these restricted, if you start a business under these restricted
conditions, yeah.
Even if you have a good idea, and there are good business ideas out there, I see some ideas, and many young entrepreneurs also start working with the society, with the local communities, and giving back and starting things that are new, but they already have a business. So it's not a new business. They're just shifting their focus. So,
okay. Chris, can you switch to the last slide there, please? If you could share that with us. I just wanted to say at this stage that we're very interested in hearing from countries that are interested in joining GEM and where we don't have a team yet. So I'm just putting it up there, how you can email us. I also wanted to emphasize that we are always interested in partnering with sponsors to produce some of the GEM's most interesting material in the form of special reports, etc., etc. And the third thing is that we have a new product that we have developed to assess the readiness of ecosystems for entrepreneurship, that is at the city or regional or sub-regional level. So if you're interested in any of those particular possibilities, please do contact us at info@gemconsortium.org. And as a final comment, Nori, could you tell me, just in a nutshell, really 2 or 3 sentences, what are the results that you will be particularly interested in having this year as a result of the GEM research?
Yes, yeah. Japan TA is always low, but looking at the people looking at the people with entrepreneurial attitude. So among this group, so the TA of Japan is higher than US.
Right.
You may not believe that, but yeah, but because the number of people with no entrepreneurial attitude so big in Japan. So
right.
This is a big problem, but focus on people with entrepreneurial attitude.
Yes,
it's good.
You're very interesting. Yeah, and that really did come out during this learning session that Japan may be in for some interesting shifts. Uli, the last word with you.
I will. For us, it will be interesting to see how the informal businesses probably increase. Because we have I see a lot of, this is maybe where I see so-called startups, because of the need to get money, to earn a living. We see a lot of, small carts out with some local fruits that are sold at places where there are people in a rather small scale kind of style, smaller than a real business we had before. So that's one point where, because we asked this question, did you register your business? So we know how large the portion of informal businesses is here in the region. And it would also be very, very interesting, I think, also for the government agencies to really find out if the money reach down to the business. Yeah, I mean, if the measures they have, the relief measures, really will be financial support, and if it really touches down to the businesses, because it might be that it touches to large businesses or medium-sized businesses, but not to the smaller ones. So this would be an interesting question as well.
Okay, and I mean, I have to say that that's just the cream on top of the cake, and there's so many more questions that will be answered through GEM research. I really want to thank you, Uli, Nori. Thank you very, very much for joining us today. It's been fascinating for me. I hope it's been very interesting for our participants, and the recording will be available for those that could not join us because of time zone or other pressures. It'll be available on our website very, very shortly. And thank you for all your comments also. We will absolutely take those into account, and the interest that you had in our learning session today. So thank you and goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Thank you.